Good morning, Team Alabama readers. We are ready for Chapter 6 in The Lottery Rose. Please find it on your Chromebook, and page 72 is where we are going to start. A reminder that Georgie had just gone and tried to plant his rose bush over in Mrs. Harper's garden. And even though Sister Mary Angela had told him, no, you can't go over there, they don't want you to. And Grandpa, Mr. Collier, had tried to tell him also that he should not be in that garden because Mrs. Harper had lost a son about his age and she really just didn't want kids over there. He went over in the middle of the night and planted it. And then she threw a fit and threw it down in front of the school, and he went over there to replant it. She found him, and he passed out from all of the injuries that he had from his beating. So he's been kind of in a fog or delirium for a few days, and Sister Mary Angela has been taking care of him, and so has actually Mrs. Harper. So we're on page 72. And you may put any of those things down as a fact. Remember, we're trying to get 50 to 70 facts per book. And so we are ready. Page 72, find it on your Chromebook. Read with me. It was this vision of the woman that renewed the threats Georgie had made in the garden. "I'll burn your house. I'll kill you dead," he told the Molly Harper of his delirium. And delirium is a word you might want to add to your vocabulary. While the real Molly Harper stood at Sister Mary Angela's side and tried to soothe him. And soothe is also a word, calm him. On the 6th day of his fever subsided, and he seemed much better until he recognized Molly bending over his bed, and his eyes widened with fear at the sight of her, and he turned his back, shrinking as far away from her as possible. Sister Mary Angela came to his bed after Molly left and sat beside him. "Mrs. Harper has been helping Dr. Blake and me take care of you, Georgie. She has been kind." He shuddered. "I hate her. She'll hurt my rose bush again. I know she will. I am so much afraid of her. You've been sick for quite a long time, Georgie. I think the fever has made you have bad dreams." She said that he'd been sick a long time. Anything could have happened in a long time. He looked at Sister Mary Angela with despair. Despair might be another word you could add to your vocabulary. Page 72. In his eyes. "You can tell me. She throwed my bush away, ain't she? Like the janitor did that night in the apartment." "If you will listen, Georgie, I'll tell you about your rose bush. Old Eddie made a bed for it over on his side of Mrs. Harper's garden. He put in the kind of food that roses need and plenty of water. Your bush is standing over there waiting for you to get well and visit it. Nothing is going to hurt it. Mrs. Harper will never pull it up again." The words were too good. They were like the words, "We'll never let Steve come here again. My boy won't have to be afraid anymore." He suddenly hated Sister Mary Angela the way that he hated his mother. Why do you think he hated them at that time? Do you suppose it's because Mom had lied to him so many times that he doesn't trust people now? I think that might be part of it. You can put down what you think, too, as a fact. "You are an old liar," he said angrily. "You are saying lies to me." He pulled the sheet over his head and burrowed far beneath it, crying and refusing either to listen or speak to her. And after a while, when he was quieter, she spoke to him again. "I've brought Timothy in to see you, Georgie. He wants to say hello." Remember, Timothy is another student there in the building, and he's just kind of become a friend to Georgie to kind of help him out. Slowly, he uncovered his head and he looked up at his visitor. Timothy grinned uneasily at him. "I got something to tell you, Georgie. All of us watched old Eddie plant your rose, me and sister and Robin's grandfather and Mrs. Harper, and even fat old Coca-Cola Amanda brought little Robin down. We wanted to tell you about it, but you was too sick to listen." "You believe Timothy, don't you, Georgie?" Sister Mary Angela interrupted in a calm voice. "You don't believe that Timothy is an old liar, do you?" Georgie felt ashamed. "Nobody here is an old liar except her," he added stubbornly. "She allowed your rose bush to be planted in her garden, Georgie. The grandfather made her do it. I know he did. He and maybe the little boy." Timothy started to speak, but Sister Mary Angela shook her head at him. "We'll talk about it when Georgie is stronger, Tim. Let's do our chores now and let him sleep for a while." They walked away together, and Georgie lay uneasy and wondering, but less agitated. Agitated is another great word to add to your vocabulary. Late that afternoon, Sister Mary Angela let him sit up in a wheelchair and pushed him out on the side porch, which faced the garden. Look straight ahead, Georgie, down just past the gate. There's your bush standing up tall, looking better than it's ever looked since you brought it here. Do you see it? He drew the long breath, half in relief, half in fear, that wouldn't quite leave him. Will she hurt it some night when we're asleep? He asked, hoping to be reassured. No one will hurt your bush. Absolutely no one. I give you my word. If I thought anyone were going to destroy it, I'd go out and do something about it. Can't you trust me? He nodded slowly. Can't we go over and talk to it? We must wait until you're stronger. I think in a few days, and I can walk over and have the visit with your friend. I think I'm well enough right now, he said, but he admitted to himself when he was back in his room that his bed felt good after being out of it for a while, and that even the short trip to the porch had left a tiredness in him. The tiredness was somehow good, though. He lay in the clean white bed, relaxed and contented, glad to be alone and able to have a waking dream of what it would be like when he could be close to his bush again. After pain and a fear that had stayed with him constantly until it wore him out and made his body sick, after all the terrible days, his rose bush was safe, and because of it, it was safe for him to rest. Sister Mary Angela did not lie. He should have known that she was not like his mother. She did not lie, and he felt safe in believing that his rose was now where it belonged, in that beautiful garden that was like a page in his flower book. It didn't matter that the garden belonged to her. The part of his brain that brought restful waking dreams to him pushed Mrs. Harper far away from his thoughts. A few days later, Sister Mary Angela took him across the building to a room that she called the chapel. She wheeled him to a side door along one of the halls, and there were suddenly on a sort of balcony that she called the choir loft. Below them was a large room full of empty seats. That is where you will sit with the other boys when you come to Vesper service. Remember evening prayers? Vesper. She said, pointing down to the empty room, today I've brought you up here where we can talk for a while. She allowed him to get out of the wheelchair and sit beside her on a low bench near the organ. I often come up here when I want to rest or when I am troubled. He looked up at her without answering. She too was quiet for a while, and then she said, do you know about God, Georgie? No, he said, and added, do you know about him? I often come up here to talk with him. He's not in this room, is he? He can hear us anywhere if we really want to talk to him. What do you talk about? He asked, looking at her curiously. I ask him sometimes to help me understand the world around me. And she paused as if she were thinking, as if she needed to find words. The world is beautiful in so many ways, but it is very cruel too, in many other ways. There are such things as children being cold and hungry and being hurt by people with twisted minds. I get angry sometimes, and I ask him to help me understand why these things should be. The world is bad, all of it, he muttered. And then remembering, he said, all but my rosebush, it's good. She was silent again for a while, and then she asked, if you could ask God to do something for you, Georgie, what would it be? His answer came without hesitation. Have a policeman kill Steve and Miss Cressman and her. Okay, remember, Steve's the boyfriend, and Miss Cressman is the teacher that was so mean to him. And her is who? Molly Harper. He's so mad at her still. He said, anger coming back to his eyes. Sister Mary Angela raised her eyes to the ceiling. She's kind of praying. I think we are not yet attuned to thy presence, she said quietly. Her voice was very low, but Georgie heard her. What did them words mean? He asked. In a way, I was just telling God that I'm sorry that you can't forgive Mrs. Harper. He did not reply at first, and then he said, she hurt my rosebush. She said mean things. You'd better tell him that. She suddenly seemed to think they should talk about something else. Do you like to listen to music, Georgie? I ain't never listened. he answered, and she rose and went up to seat herself at the organ. Well, I love music the way that you love flowers. Sometimes I like to come up here and play the organ so that I can relax and forget the things that may be troubling me. You listen and see if you like my music. Her hands touched the keys, and they made a quiet singing for a few minutes. And then she pushed some of the little squares in front of her, and the singing swelled until it filled the whole chapel and echoed as if there was a great happiness inside the organ, and it was telling everyone who listened that not quite all the world was bad. Georgie caught his breath as the music grew louder and sweeter, and when it finally turned to a whisper and then stopped altogether, he looked up at Sister Mary Angela with wonder. "How can you make it sound like that?" he asked. "Because I've trained my fingers for many years," she answered, "and because I love music so much." There was a catch in his voice as he spoke. "It's nice," he said. She smiled at him. "Yes, I'm glad you liked it, Georgie." And as they prepared to go back to his room, Georgie turned to her again. "Can I come back and hear the music sometimes?" "Of course." Georgie noticed that her eyes looked full of happiness about something. The next day, Timothy came up to Georgie's room and sat with him for an hour. Georgie was strained and uneasy with his caller at first, but no one stayed uneasy with Timothy for very long. Sister Mary Angela called him her public relations boy. Timothy had no idea what she meant by that, but he assumed from her tone that it was good. "It was nice that Mrs. Harper let your rose bush be planted in her garden, wasn't it, Georgie?" he asked. Georgie's dark eyes glinted. "The little boy's grandfather made her do it," he said grimly, and then honesty made him add, "Anyway, I think that's what happened." Timothy was thoughtful for a minute, and she used to be friendlier, and that was before Paul and his dad got killed. She used to say hi to us once in a while, and once she had a birthday party for Paul, and all of us that was about his age got to go. Did you ever go over there just to play with the boy? For some reason, Georgie did not wish to say Paul. "Sure, a few times. Paul invited me to go swimming with him in the lake one time. Me and Kevin, I think it was. And one other time I went with Paul when he took Robin down to feed the duck family on the lake." Timothy laughed at something he remembered. "That was a big deal for Robin. He'd hold tight to Paul's hand and yell and try to jump up and down when he saw the ducks fighting over the bread that we threw them." And Georgie smiled. "He's a nice little kid, I guess." "Yeah," Timothy pulled at his ear and frowned. "Yeah, he's all right, but you have to be awful patient with a kid like Robin. He wouldn't be still 5 minutes when me and Paul wanted to sit in the playhouse their grandfather made for them in the banyan tree. We wanted to talk a while and make plans for building a birdhouse, but Robin kept bugging us to take him back to the lake so that he could see the ducks." "Did you ever build the birdhouse?" Georgie asked. Timothy shook his head. "The week after I was there, Paul got killed." The memory seemed to make Timothy sad. He rose to leave shortly after. "Sister said I mustn't wear you out." He extended his hand for a handshake that he had been taught to make upon leaving, and Georgie had shaken hands only a few times before and never with another child. He was shy and somewhat embarrassed, but pleased too. He liked Timothy. By the next day, he was beginning to fret. Okay, fret is a great word to add, or worry, at not being able to go over to the garden. "I feel so good, sister. Why can't I go over and see my rose bush?" he asked as soon as she came in to see him. "The doctor thinks that you can go out for a while tomorrow. Let's rest now and be ready to go over in the morning." "Before breakfast?" "Afterwards, and then you can stay longer. You won't forget you promised?" She sighed. "Georgie, I make promises to dozens of boys every day, almost every day. I never yet have forgotten one of them. I promise you again, you'll see your rosebush tomorrow." Okay, we're at the end of chapter 6 and finished on page 81. I'd like for you to go ahead and add a few facts right now. What do we know? Georgie is over his stretch of being ill. And who helped take care of him? And where is his rose bush? And who continues to visit him? And where did Sister Mary Angela take him? And she tried to get him to talk to God there, or at least explain who God was to him. Okay, add a few facts today. Have a great rest of the day, Team Alabama, and we will be ready for Chapter 7. Thank you.